All right, thanks everyone for joining CEO Speaks. I have Sandeep Johri. I'm really excited to have Sandeep here. He's the CEO of Checkmarx. He's also been a founder. He's been an investor for many years. So looking forward to have your perspective on the podcast here, Sandeep. Thanks for joining.
Thanks, Ben. Thanks for having me. This is great.
Great. So let's start with your background. You have a very varied background over the last 25 or so years. You've worked at big companies, small companies. You've helped, found companies from pre-revenue to, tens of millions to hundreds of millions in revenue. You've worked with founders to help them achieve their dreams of bringing a company to life, but then scaling it. So I'd love to hear your perspective on business. But let's start with, how you kind of got into this business, and some of the startups you've worked with over the last 20 years or so.
Yeah, so I got into tech because I was in Michigan. I loved cars and wanted to be in the auto industry. When I got there, I realized it's kind of slow and boring compared to what I expected, and happened to visit California in the mid '80s and just got super excited about the energy. Remember, this is just post when PCs were kind of taking off and the future looked so bright, and just the progressive policies here. At the time it was flexible work hours and you can do your own thing, all these things. The weather obviously helped compared to Michigan, but that's how I got in. I had friends here, came here on a December from minus 50 wind chill in Michigan, and said, "Oh my God, like this is paradise," and took a one-way ticket to come to business school here in California, and with the intent of getting into tech. And after business school, just have been focused on tech ever since. So
Oh, nice. Yeah, I think that's a familiar story for a lot of folks. The speed of innovation, the speed of change, uh, I think just continues to accelerate, right? We see that in every industry, but specifically technology drives that in every industry, right? So we're at the center of it, and being in Silicon Valley, I've had very similar experience. My parents came from Connecticut to the Bay Area. And I kind of got bit by the tech bug because I grew up in the middle of it, and you're just surrounded by it. So that's great. So Sandy, why don't you tell us about the first couple companies you got involved in? How did you get involved in them? And then we can go from there.
I'm sorry, how I got involved
In your
in
first couple companies.
Yeah, so like I said, because I was coming from a different industry, I didn't really have the credibility. I was an engineer, I am an engineer, but didn't have the credibility. So what do you do in that situation? I said, let me join a consulting company. I'll do a whole bunch of work with them and learn about the industry across multiple domains, and that's what I did for the first 4 years. And then had a great opportunity to work at Silicon Graphics, which was a really hot company in the mid '90s. I got a great opportunity to work and kind of be on more of an operating role. And then the startup bug hit me, and got together with a few friends and decided to do my first startup. This was in '96. We did the standard route. I didn't know my two other founders, but got to know them. We all got excited, went and raised seed money, and then pounded pavement on Sandhill. At the time, there were not as many VCs, and most of them, almost everyone said no, which was a learning experience. But then landed up, pivoted the company a couple of times and landed up getting our first round from Kleiner Perkins, who at the time was the best VC to you could imagine as validation of
Yeah.
your idea. So that's where we got started. I mean, that was my first startup, and way back in the late '90s. So
Well, you must have done something right because some people said no, but Kleiner said yes. So
exactly.
they
Well, all the others that said no then came back, said, "Hey, we weren't really serious about no, but let us know about the next round." So
nice,
how
nice,
that goes.
nice, nice. So you had your kind of founding experience, and then you moved on to working with founders who were trying to scale their businesses. So I know you were at a previous company prior to Checkmarx. You're now at Checkmarx. Tell us a little bit about what the difference is between, coming up with an idea, pounding pavement, trying to get investors to be your customer, essentially, right?
Yeah.
To founding a company, to helping founders run their companies. What is the challenge you've kind of seen the founders have, going through the different stages from pounding pavement with investors to pounding pavement with customers?
Yeah, at the first company, it was my first real managerial role. Plus, I was CEO, plus kind of driving a new business. Had a lot, learned a lot. But as we scaled and we got to like 200, 300 people, I really felt I did not have enough experience in managing people, managing a larger business. The intellect was there, but the muscle wasn't there. And that's actually what made me go work at a large company. And I had offers from multiple large companies. I wanted to go and work in a large enterprise to get that muscle, build that muscle. And I ended up and I joined HP, not with the intent of just being there for a few years, learning some of the skills of scaling and then getting out. As it turns out, I was there for 8 years and had a great experience there. And really, we took the software business at HP from what was then a $600 million business losing money to a $3.5 billion business at 25-30% margin. So it was a great learning experience personally on how to scale business, how to manage global teams and the like. And at the end of that, I wanted to come back to my roots of kind of smaller companies where I could drive growth. So I ended up joining a startup for a short time, for a year or so, but then joined Tricentis, which was an existing company. I thought about starting something myself, but also felt that I could bring a lot more value where the company already has product and is now looking to scale. So when I joined my previous company, Tricentis, they had a product. They had just transitioned from a services company to a product company. They had less than 5 million in product sales, but really wanted someone who could help them scale. And being a founder myself, I could relate to the founders, and we made a great team and scaled that company. Today, I scaled it to about 250 million or so, and today it's still a private company. It's a leader in the category. So it was a great experience. I did that for about 8 years. And the company was actually based out of Austria. So I had my global experience at HP also allowed me to kind of manage, learn how to work with European and international teams and the like, which all helped. After that, Checkmarx was more of the same, if you may. I was looking for something different. And Checkmarx happens to be an Israeli company that actually was not that young, in that we already had about, a little shy of 200 million of revenue, but we're looking to kind of go to the next phase. So that's kind of how I got to Checkmarx. And domain-wise, it was very similar to what I'd done at HP, what I'd done at Tricentis. It was all in the enterprise IT, DevOps. So domain-wise, it was very familiar. But scaling-wise, it's something that I'd done before and had the muscle, coming back to the earlier metaphor. So yeah, that's how I landed at Checkmarx. I've been here for about 18 months. So
Okay. So what were some of the things that you wish you would have known as a founder that you learned at HP through your scaling experience?
well, many things. Now looking back, I just am amazed at how kind of green I was. But along multiple fronts, product market fit, selling to, how to sell into the enterprise, how to manage sales teams, management in general, kind of how to manage, inspire, lead teams, all of that. I mean, pretty much on all dimensions, I would say. Startups are learning by fire, and larger companies give you a little more structure. You can look around and find people who are in more senior positions who you can learn from. So both of them were highly useful to me personally. I mean, startup, you
Mhm.
learn by fire. You're in the thick of it, you figure it out, right? So the learning curve is much faster in a startup. In a larger company, you do learn a different set of skills, and you learn from people that are not winging it. They've actually done it and have some method to the madness, if you may. At a startup, it's like all just madness. You just learn by fire by being in the thick of it, right? And sometimes you get it right, and sometimes you don't, right? So,
That's right. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
the pace is very different, right? At a
Mhm.
startup, you're kind of on a daily basis, things are going up and down and moving. At a larger company, you learn patience and a little more long term, kind of a bigger ship that moves but has more impact. So,
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. You have different types of resources,
right.
making bigger, longer term bets. You have customers that you're looking to expand or acquire companies and acquire customers. So, you kind of are building you're kind of like a bank, and you're just, kind of investing things and trying to figure out, which direction to go, and then you have a great technology behind you, but you just have a lot of resources. Versus a startup, you're kind of fighting every day to day,
That's
even
right.
when you're bigger, right? Because you just don't have those types of resources. Um, so let's talk a little bit about Tricentis and Checkmarx. At a huge company like HP, you have a lot of resources. You have the brand. What did you learn about building a brand at Tricentis and building, kind of a community at Tricentis? Because it was in the developer space, is kind of a space that you can build those types of communities versus, you know, enterprise sales where you bring in the suits, right? So,
Yeah.
what was that like?
Yeah, actually, that was really what led to Tricentis' success. We were, as a startup, you have to have a unique value proposition, and Tricentis in the testing space. So, a lot of testing, software testing, is done manually, done offshore, and with the adoption of DevOps. There was an opportunity to kind of automate all of that, integrate it into the DevOps cycle. So we kind of created a unique position and a unique identity for the company, which was around continuous testing, kind of going from waterfall, manual, slower testing to continuous testing that's been integrated into the DevOps, is highly automated and the like. So you could actually take the idea of automation and take it all the way to making it continuous, if you may, in the dev cycle. So that's kind of we built our brand as the next gen testing platform that enables you to do continuous testing as opposed to what you did before. So there was a shift, if you may, in terms of how we associated Tricentis with kind of the next thing, if you may. We were the next generation of a very familiar function, if you may. So that's gonna and Tricentis got associated with that brand. Now, if you think of uh, developers and testers, especially, so our first job was to convince testers to use the new set of tools, and a lot of testing is done offshore. So we invested a lot in offshore GSI, the big SI community. And one of the things we did is we made all the certifications free. So we put a very nice certification program, and where you could certify at various levels and actually spread the word, made it free so individual testers and individual developers could certify. When they certify at a higher level, it created primary demand for us, but also our customers. When you would pitch the new platform, one of the questions they would ask is, how many people know about this? Who can use it? And we could go to them and say, hey, we have a community of 5,000. It started out at a few thousand and eventually landed up being more than 200, 300,000 that were certified. And that kind of creates a circular positive feedback loop, right? Where the more people you have certified, the more well known the tool, the more customers are comfortable adopting it because it's a skill set people know. So we did a lot of grassroots DevRel, what you would call DevRel today, but in this case, it was not targeted so much as developers as it was at manual testers.
Mm. And how did the customer change over time from the early days? of trying to get customers in early days versus kind of the mainstream customer that you got later on? Did that profile change? Did the type of customer change, or was it just you just had to get enough momentum to get in front of those customers?
Our customer base did not change. We did not start as a PLG type motion going into the mid or the small segment and then going up. Tricentis was always focused on the large enterprise. For that matter, even the 3 or 5 million or whatever in ARR or in license revenue that they had was mostly large enterprises. So the good news was we didn't have to shift that. We just think, however, all of those customers were in Europe, so we were not known at all in the US. So building out a presence in the US was a non-trivial thing, but our profile did not change. We always targeted the global 5,000, and even within them, it was really the global 2,000 that we were targeting. So we were very focused on the large enterprise customer base.
I talked to a lot of companies who are, you know, in North America trying to get to EMEA, in EMEA trying to get to North America. You know, how did you make that transition, and how did you build out a go-to-market team and build the brand in North America, coming from the European perspective?
Yeah, so I mean that was, I would say, probably the biggest challenge is making that cross border, and it's much easier for for a U.S. software company to move to Europe. I shouldn't say it's much easier. You move at a much later stage. You know, you can get to 30, 40, 50 million without even going to Europe. And at that point, you have a lot more maturity as a company. In Europe, Tricentis was based in Austria, and we sold only into the German-speaking region. So our geography was Austria, which is a very small country, Germany, and then a little bit of, you know, like half of Switzerland. And it was not only expanding from that German-speaking region to the rest of Europe, and then expanding to the US. So that was not a trivial thing. It was probably the biggest kind of hurdle we had to get through. Me being in the US, we had, you know, I hired a US team, a US sales team, and European, and they had tried this in the past. They had European sales guys and European leaders come over to the US, and that didn't work because culturally it's very different. You know, how you sell and the like. So you really have to localize, if you may. You know, in this case, localizing meant getting a US team that can speak US lingo, engage with customers the way we do it in the US versus Europeans tend to be a little different. And each country in Europe tends to be a little different. So you know, there was a huge cultural shift we had to do in how we messaged, how we sold. It was not a trivial task. And we got lucky in that I got some early, really experienced sales guys that really put some of our marquee customers on the map in the US. Like we got a large oil and gas company, Fortune 5, and we got one of the largest banks as customers. With those two, we could very quickly establish credibility and go to all the, you know, a lot of, these were brands that are absolutely well known and highly credible. So that really helped us getting those early accounts.
So was you know, were you guys early to the market and kind of helped define the market? Were you kind of, I don't know, mid stage, and there were a couple other competitors? You know, how did you guys think about the timing of both the startup in Europe and also timing as you went to market in the US? Because it's always a little tricky when you're early, but it's a good thing sometimes too.
Yeah, in our case, you know, testing, there's 100 testing tools. There's open source, there's all kinds of testing tools. Plus, the largest company in testing was something that I had acquired at HP. So I was very familiar with the testing domain. It was a company called Mercury Interactive, which happened to be an Israeli company. And so I was familiar with the space. So it was not a new category in that sense, but the category was shifting. And every time you have a shift, you know, we've seen that from, you know, client server to cloud and, you know, non-SaaS to SaaS. In our case, it was dev environments were shifting from waterfall to DevOps. And there was no testing company or testing platform that was associated with more DevOps centric toolkits. And so
Mm,
we had a lot of competitors, but they were all kind of more legacy positioned, and we positioned ourselves more as a more modern, next gen, more suitable for continuous testing, which is what was needed for DevOps. So we did a lot of evangelism, but we associated ourselves with a newer phenomenon, which
okay, great.
was already adopting, and we were one more cog in the wheel that was needed there. So
Mm. Well, so you did testing at HPE, you did testing at Tricentis, you do a little bit of testing, I think, at Checkmarx. How has the market matured, right? I mean, there's still a lot of companies who are not in DevOps, they're not doing Agile. We've seen a lot of greenfield and newer technologies like cloud, for example, that's helped kind of drive the new change. But how do you see kind of the old guard changing or are we always going to have these two different worlds that
now
coexist?
it's changing a lot. So in the tech environment, we shifted from kind of waterfall to DevOps like 15 years ago, right? So
Hmm.
when
Hmm.
at Tricentis, when we were pushing these, DevOps had just kind of become a term. And, I'm talking 2014, 2015.
Hmm.
In the Valley, even though the term DevOps was new, kind of, not doing waterfall, it was called Agile. We had already adopted Agile
Yep.
methodologies. Enterprises were new to that. You're right. Enterprises, you would walk into a large bank and they would say, hey, yeah, some of our teams are Agile now. And, but they all, even by 2014 or 15, every enterprise was committed to moving to agile, and then that kind of, in a broader sense, became DevOps. So
Hmm.
everyone was committed, and we were helping them get there, if you may.
Hmm.
So it has shifted, but you would run into an enterprise, every large enterprise, that would be 10% agile. The rest of their teams were still doing waterfall. That has shifted. Today, even at large enterprises, not maybe 100%, but a majority of their application teams are operating in a DevOps tool set, DevOps mindset. So it's shifted quite a bit. And they might be, and there are some large enterprises that are 100% kind of modern DevOps, agile development, DevOps toolkit. So now, and that's where Checkmarx comes in. The trend is now, you don't really need to evangelize DevOps. It's there. It's a
Yep.
matter of how far they've already done it. Now, what people are doing is taking DevOps to DevSecOps, where they really want to integrate. Even as companies were adopting DevOps, security was still a parallel path, if you may. That was still operating primarily post dev, kind of almost as a gate. And people are increasingly integrating security into the DevOps. So that's why the term DevSecOps. And not
Mm.
every enterprise we talk to today has security fully integrated into their DevOps workflow, but that's happening. That's exactly where the number one ask from CISOs today is, from an app dev perspective, application security perspective, is integrated into the DevOps workflow. So that's the market has shifted completely, in that used to be mostly waterfall, with some enterprises doing agile and DevOps, to almost everybody committed to it and at various stages. And now they're taking it a step further and integrating security into it. So,
Essentially, we are now where you were before in the DevOps space. You're going from waterfall to agile to DevOps. Now we're in this DevOps world where people don't have security controls, and now everyone's trying to figure out how do I mature my security program with developers? Where the intersection of application security and
Right.
DevOps meets.
Yeah.
So
So
what,
how do we integrate that right into the dev workflow? So
mhm. So what's the biggest challenge you see customers have with this problem? Like, how do you see them going about trying to tackle it? How do you see them maturing their programs? It's one thing to say, hey, great, let's put this on our strategic roadmap and let's prioritize it. It's another thing to actually accomplish it. And now, not you don't just have the developer team and the DevOps teams. Now you have DevOps, you have security, you have a lot of different teams,
yeah.
which creates more complexity, especially with these huge, massive companies, like you said, a Fortune 5 or Fortune 100.
Yeah. And I mean, the biggest challenge is convincing developers to integrate security into their whole dev cycle. Many developers are not as familiar with security, so there's a and in a way, security, or when you discover vulnerabilities and they have to go fix it, it's like fixing bugs, right? No one likes to do that, so
Mhm.
it's kind of a pain in the ass. Just like no developer enjoys. No developer says, "I'm super excited today because today I'm going to spend all day fixing bugs." That's not what they get excited about.
That's
So
right. Yeah.
uh, them and vulnerabilities that we discover that they need to go fix is the same kind of thing. It's something that they have to do. They realize they need to do, but it's not something that they get super excited about. So the biggest challenge is adoption, and our challenge as a vendor in that space is to how do we make it easy for them? How do we make it quickly enable them, make it easy so that they don't have to kind of leave their environment, their IDEs, for example, and go do something different. So we try to make our whole mantra is to make what we call developer experience. How do we make security seamlessly into their workflow? So, for example, now a lot of developers are using Copilot, right? You can use Copilot. You have auto-generated code, and you can say, "Okay, I'm done." Well, we have a plugin that allows you to scan for vulnerabilities right there. So you use a plugin like a Copilot plugin, and let's say it generates code. We can scan the code right there, and before a developer accepts that code, they can say, "Oh, here's two problems in this code. And we also suggest how to fix it, so they can actually take that auto-generated code, identify two vulnerabilities they found, fix it, and then accept. So it makes it very painless, right? Because you don't have to discover it later. You're right there in context. We tell you how to fix it. We tell you what it is right there. We tell you how to fix it, and you can quickly move. That's an example of improving the developer experience. But biggest challenge is adoption, is getting developers to adopt security into their thinking and into their workflows as
Yeah.
left as possible.
Yeah. In other kind of scenarios with testing, it's kind of been, where's one team is doing developing and another team does the testing. Um, and that creates a lot of challenges because the developer is the one who knows what they're creating. They have the context. And if they could fix it in the workflow, then it's also less time and money for you to have to hire a team to go build testing out, right? So,
Yeah, more,
um,
yeah, more and more the testing team is integrated into the dev team. So it's not a separate team that is doing it after the fact. It's kind of very much embedded. So
correct. Yeah, that was kind of the main shift from waterfall to agile to DevOps. So tell us a little bit about some of the CISO conversations you have. How has those conversations changed over the last couple of years as you've been building the business, and how have things changed from from on-prem to cloud? How are CISOs thinking about building their business and managing it, and how is cloud playing a role in that?
yeah, so for CISOs, from an application security point of view, there are too many applications. There's two main asks. Literally every CISO has mentioned as their top priorities. One is applications have become complex, meaning there's custom code, there's open source, there is a lot more APIs, both internal and external. Then you put it into a container, then you put it into a cloud environment. So the definition of what is an app has changed, and therefore you need to worry about security from many, many angles. And there are too many tools for CISOs from a security point of view. There's like 3, 4, 5 in some cases, one tool for every aspect. So one key ask for them is I want to consolidate. It's too noisy, too confusing, too many tools. One is consolidate. I want it consolidated into a single application security platform. You tell me everything that I need to worry about, meaning all aspects of it. That's one. Number two is what I was talking about earlier, which is I don't want a security tool that only security people can understand. I want a tool that can be easily integrated into the workflow so that the developers are enabled and can easily fix things. So we have to prioritize the right things. We have to enable developers. We have to know which developers working on which piece of the code so that we can tell them, here's your piece of code, here's the vulnerability, blah, blah, blah. We have to get context across all these various views of looking at security. So that's the CISOs have two main asks. One is help me consolidate, and two, help me integrate it into the workflow. That's been consistent, literally 100% of CISOs. I've not had a single CISO tell me something outside of these two. Now, in the last 6 months, there's a third thing that has been added, which is what do I do with Gen AI? With the buzz that Gen AI is driving, my CEO, my CIO are saying, hey, let's adopt Gen AI because we can improve productivity of developers, which have been in short supply and are expensive and are difficult to find, blah, blah, blah. So people are adopting Copilot and Gen AI kind of tools, especially for code generation and for developers. The CISO's challenge is, hey, what is this? Let's say they improve their productivity by 20%. That means there's 20% more auto-generated code. How do I deal with that? So you just increase the floodgates of code being generated. And that's where, that's their kind of next challenge. The enterprise wants to adopt Gen AI faster because it is going to lead to productivity gains. But from a security point of view, it creates that many more security problems. So that is the big challenge that CISOs are facing is how do I let people adopt Gen AI tools faster because everyone wants to and it makes sense, but how do I make sure that it's secure as well? And that's all of the things that we are introduced and are working on.
So Gen AI is the new thing everyone is talking about. And to your point, it's providing a ton of opportunity for productivity. I think that's the place that everyone is focused, whether it's call center to developers, right? It's all about productivity and time to value and better customer outcomes, call it, right? Customer could be the security team in this example. So what do you see customers needing to adopt and have a robust security program in order to be able to do the Gen AI piece? Because that's call it cherry on top stuff, right? So what do customers have to get right before they can even do that at scale? Because you could do anything in a vacuum or a silo, but what do you have to do to be ready for that? And what do you see your customers doing to get ready for that?
Yeah, so our customers, you're right. They're Copilot is kind of the low-hanging fruit. It's productivity enhancement for developers, and people are adopting it. There, it's relatively easy. We have great products there where we were the first ones to have a Copilot plugin, both for ChatGPT and for Azure or GitHub Copilot, where, like I said, as soon as you have auto-generated code, we can test it. And basically, you're creating a security gateway so that don't assume that auto-generated code is vulnerability-free. For that matter, it has more vulnerabilities than human-generated code because Gen AI tools are like inexperienced developers equivalent. Those are relatively easy to do. Tools like ours can help you address that and put some guardrails in the line. What gets more complex and more interesting is my IP getting exposed? Is how do I keep control of what data is going out and what custom code that I have that I consider to be my IP is getting leaked into a Gen AI tool. So we are now building capability where we can control and monitor that as well. That's one dimension. The second dimension of kind of quote the new challenges are every time there's something new, hackers don't go to sleep. They come up with new ways of exploiting that new thing, whether it was the cloud or uh, open source or whatever. And same thing for AI. There are AI kind of hallucinations that hackers. We've found evidence of people kind of preempting learning LLMs to generate malicious code automatically. So when you think you're using Copilot and you get some auto-generated code, it might have malicious code in there. Or hallucinations, where you're looking for an open source package to do ABC, and the LLM doesn't find it and kind of creates one, and you think it's an open source project, but it's actually a hallucinated thing. So there are new threat vectors that we need to worry about, and companies are thinking about these, using tools like ours to put governance and the like. And then for some of the newer areas, they're being cautious on how quickly to go about doing it. And different companies have different, as in any technology, some companies tend to be a little faster and earlier adopters, others tend to be a little more cautious. And it's a function of their personality and their industry as well. So,
So that's 100% agreed, right? Every organization is a little different. Their risk appetite is different, and their maturity is based on that. So Sandeep, I know you guys have been working to get all of your technology cloud. Tell us a little bit about how you organizationally did that, right? You talked a little bit about how you went from EMEA to cloud to North America earlier in your career. Was it kind of like that? Was it going from on-prem to cloud? Was it like going EMEA to America? What was it like to rebuild the product? What were some of the things you kind of came up against that you weren't expecting when you were doing that? And then, how is it looking now on the other side of this?
Yeah, so at Checkmarx, we historically were primarily on-prem, and even before my time, the company started building out a cloud-native platform. So our platform today, Checkmarx One, is a cloud-native platform and addresses this consolidation story that I was talking about, in that it has all the elements you need for application security. Companies, typically on-prem companies, when they build out a cloud, when they try to shift to being a SaaS or a cloud-native company, typically have stumbles along the way. And luckily for Checkmarx, we architected it right. The team did a good job, where I've been in places and I've heard of, and we all know plenty of on-prem companies that get it right only on the third attempt or the second attempt. And we were, meaning architecturally getting the new product, because most of your team's mindset is on-prem, and you have to think differently, which is why companies don't get it right.
Yep.
Luckily, we got that right. We architected it right. We truly got it right. So our platform, Checkmarx One, we didn't have to kind of redo it, which a lot of companies land up having to. They attempt it once, they don't get it all right, and then kind of flush it and redo it. So that was something that thanks to the team, they got it right. Thanks to the architects and the engineers that they got it right. But you also have to change a lot of your engineering processes internally. So we have been in the process of doing that, where as a SaaS company, you have to think about canary releases, you have to think about feature flags and things like that. So those were not as relevant in on-prem solutions. Like you don't really have feature flags in on-prem solutions. You don't have, you can do a canary release where you go gradually. You don't have as much telemetry, because on-prem tools, at least for large enterprises, people don't want any telemetry going back. Well, for a SaaS tool, telemetry is one of your advantages. You know exactly who's doing what every day. in terms of usage. So we had to learn to build a lot of all of that. So as a company, it's a big transition going from an on-prem to a cloud native SaaS multi-tenant environment. From a customer point of view, from customers, we have to do some convincing. If they're used to an on-prem solution, you need to convince them that your cloud solution is better and why. Most companies realize that they would they themselves want to adopt cloud native tools because they don't have to worry about installing it and managing it and upgrading it and all of that. But it takes some convincing, and then people expect everything to work exactly how it worked on an on-prem solution, and it's not how it does. So there's a bit of a mindset change as well that you have to go through. So it's not a trivial thing, but we did that and then many other customers also have to change their business model from a licensing perpetual license model to a recurring model, which we had already done a long time ago, so we didn't have to do that here. So.
Mhm. Yeah, I think your comment about architecture is critical, right? We work with a lot of end users who are trying to do their cloud migration. Many times you hear 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 times, and the challenge is you just cannot do what you do on-prem in the cloud, right? You have to
Right.
change how you run your business,
Right.
and you have to have really good architecture, and it's actually a really hard skill set to acquire. There's not a lot of people who've lived that experience and actually been through the potholes, seen the problems, and actually gotten to the cloud, right? Let alone secured it the right way the first time. So that's a whole nother conversation.
Yeah, and with the SaaS product, you really have to have all of your engineering be DevOps. So you have to do continuous builds. You can't do you have to do week or 2 week sprints. So everything has to change, and that's not a trivial task. So.
Yeah, let me ask you a question. You went through this transition. How hard was it to do this transition with the talent pool out there? As you know, it's very competitive. It's hard to find really good developers. How did you do this with with an on-prem team moving to cloud? How did you kind of think about changing it? And then what were you surprised with the type of talent that you had, and also the talent that you had to kind of get involved in with this?
Yeah, actually, in both cases, it was slightly different. In the case of Tricentis, we were in Austria. There wasn't a deep pool of people with SaaS cloud native experience at the time in Austria. So we had to, it wasn't like, Austria or Vienna is where we were based. It's not like Silicon Valley where you can find unlimited resources, or in Berlin you could find those kinds of resources. So we had a challenge there. But what we did is we hired senior leadership in engineering that had that experience, and they drove the cultural change. We couldn't swap out our engineering team. We had to evolve our engineering team, because even if you wanted to swap out, you couldn't find a pool of kind of cloud native SaaS experienced engineers. In Israel, which is at Checkmarx, our dev team is primarily in Israel and Portugal. In both those places, there's plenty of talent with that experience. Also, remember, it's 10 years later, more than 10 years. Right? I'm talking about Vienna in 2014, 15. Even Vienna has changed a lot. There's plenty of pool there too, because all the modern companies have been DevOps and cloud native and blah, blah. In Israel, we don't have a talent pool challenge. There's plenty of talent that has deep expertise. But here again, we did hire a head of engineering who came from a SaaS only environment and was very, very familiar with all the processes and the metrics and the processes and dev practices that were needed. So he drove the change, which was really helpful. So you really need to have people that have done it before, because they can bring best practices and they've been through that transition. Um, and that really helped in both cases, is when we brought in the right leadership that had that experience that could drive that change, because it is a cultural change for the teams.
Yeah, and so that's great. I think the other challenge is going from on-prem to cloud is to your point, the complexity, but what comes out of the complexity is data. So it becomes harder to manage everything, but the beauty is now you have a lot access to a ton of data. So what was some of the data that you got insight to from customer perspective or even internal that now you have access to that helps you run your business better, helps you understand what's going on with your customers? And then maybe three, what you're actually surfacing to customers. To your point, if I'm going from on-prem into cloud and I have to change my whole business, I want to have better data, right? So, what are you kind of seeing on the data side and the metric side?
I mean, for us, the biggest challenge with on-prem is twofold. One, we don't have visibility into how well the developers are adopting the tool. So why? Because we just don't have visibility. So we have to rely on the customer to tell me how they're doing. With our Checkmarx One platform, we know exactly how the developers are using it, because we have IDE plugins. We know at the individual developer level how much code adoption there is. So
Mm.
with Checkmarx One, we can go back to the CISO and say, look, this is the level of developer adoption with these teams and these projects, these teams, these applications. We can be very precise about that. So that's one. And the other is the fidelity of the vulnerabilities themselves. We discover a lot of vulnerabilities. We then correlate them and prioritize them. So again, on-prem, we don't have any visibility into that. With the cloud native SaaS offering, Checkmarx One, we can tell the customers that you still have, you need to further prioritize, or you need to fine tune your scanning in this way, so that we can help them optimize that day. When it is on-prem, you don't have visibility. So sometimes you don't know if they're struggling. Only if they tell you, you know that they're struggling.
Yeah, and then that's too late.
Yeah, we can tell them proactively, hey, your adoption is going down, or your adoption is progressing well, those kinds of things. And then, a value for the customer is one of the things we surface for them is an overall risk score for each of their applications. That, we can also bring benchmarks from the industry, which is the collective data. We can bring intelligence about individual vulnerabilities collectively across all our customers and surface it to the customers, so they can find value in that as well. So
Yeah, that's great. That's the beauty of SaaS. I think that's a huge benefit to understand where you are against your peers,
Mhm,
and that helps you understand both where you are, where you want to go, but maybe you're okay with where you are.
mhm.
That's okay too. All right, well, Sandeep, it was great to have you on the podcast. I guess my last question is, what are you excited about? You've seen all kinds of stuff from founding companies to large companies to going from on-prem to cloud. Is it the AI thing that keeps you excited about waking up every day to run this company in the direction? What are you excited about?
Uh, Twofold. One, yes, AI, of course, it is a game changer, and we actually don't yet know exactly how much of an impact it'll be, but
Yep.
it will continue to massively impact every element, and for security as well, application security, both in the usability of it, which is what I was talking about, but also the new issues that come up. It opens a whole new world of new potential problems, right, from vulnerabilities and a security point of view. So that is something that, application security continues to be exciting, and the need for it continues to expand. At a more operational micro level here, the application security industry has a lot of vendors doing individual tools, and there's an opportunity for consolidation. And we have a great platform that is a consolidation platform. So I'm most excited about driving that consolidation and being one of the consolidators so that we drive to leadership in the category. We are recognized by Gartner as one of the leaders, but I would like to be the leader, the go-to company when you think about application security. So that's kind of the most exciting. That's the agenda, and that's the strategy. That's the agenda, and that's
Okay.
the most exciting part. So.
Yeah, I agree. There's two things that I wake up every day thinking about, right? One is the product and the strategy, and kind of the founder piece is kind of always kind of kicking, right? And then there's the CEO piece, which is okay. How do I move this? How do I move this ship? And
Uh-huh.
how do I, accomplish great things with great people? And I
Right.
think that's always actually the more fulfilling thing, right?
Mhm.
Both for yourself, your company, and customers.
Right.
So appreciate you joining, Sandeep. It's great to see you again, and thanks for being on the podcast.
Great. Thanks, Ben. Enjoyed the conversation.